All right. So to start, I'm going to start off by saying something very controversial, but it's the truth, And I always say it's better if you live in reality and you accept reality for what it is instead of living in a fantasy land where you want things to be the way you expect things to be, which is fair and just. Okay. So what I'm going to say here is simple. Men and women will never be equals because men and women, we're physically built differently, we emotionally process and handle things differently. There are going to be things that women are there are going to be things that most women are way more better at than most men. And then there are going to be things that most men are way more better at than most women. All right. And I want you guys to understand when I use these podcasts and I speak, I try to use words like most or likely, not trying to generalize it and say all, because there's no way that all men are better than all men are better in a particular subject than women, and then there's no way that all women are better at a particular subject than all men. All right, there are the exceptions. All right. So with that being said, I want to focus on workplace disparity as far as pay. All right, the pay gap that everybody's talking about. Naturally, like I said, there are going to be industries that women dominate, and women makes more money, and women are the majority of people working in that industry. And those industries typically are industries that deal with, healthcare, education, the arts, anything that normally deals with, and I hate to say it like that, but it is what it is. Anything that deals with taking care of people and that requires an emotional or a level of intelligence, um, an emotional that requires an emotional bond, all right, or anything that requires patience, all right. Well, I guess that's the wrong word, but anything that really requires caring for someone, and I'm trying to correct myself here, but anything that really requires really caring for someone and empathizing with them, women will always dominate that. I feel because women are more sympathetic than men. Industries that require a lot of physical labor or intense labor will typically be dominated by men, right? And unfortunately, most jobs that you go to, the minimum requirement for you to get the job is going to be able to lift 25 to 50 pounds, right? And if you notice that, that's just the industry that we live in right now, the world that we live in, right? Now, a lot of people talk about what about the professional jobs? What about the lawyers, the CEOs, the board of directors, right? And I'm not making an excuse for anyone, but I'm just saying let's live in the reality of what the world really is. If you are a woman and you decide, and keep in mind before you guys start thinking about like saying I'm picking on one or the other, I'm gonna go looking at it from both sides of the fence. I'm gonna talk about how you know it affects men and how it affects women from the point of view of both. Okay. So don't think I'm just picking on one. All right. So just to make it fair, let's start off with men. If a man decides that he wants to uh, have a career, right? And you always hear this concept that rich men will date a or marry a waitress, a maintenance worker, a girl who's flipping burgers, or somebody who doesn't have as much as he has. In other words, to make it kind of blunt, rich men or successful men or men that have ambition, they typically will date and marry down, right? They very solemnly, very rarely would you see a very successful man date and marry a successful woman or a woman that is just as driven or ambitious as he is and see the marriage last unless there's always an exception. Unless both of them have already agreed that they don't want to have kids, or if they decide to have kids, they're going to hire nannies to take care of them. Otherwise, one of the individuals will have to give up their dream, right? One of them, if both of them are driven and ambitious, somebody's going to have to give up their career or not go as hard on their career or their dreams or their aspirations because they decided they wanted to have a family. And whoever decides that they want to have the family, that's typically the person who should give up that dream or that aspiration. Otherwise, it just won't work. And this is why you will see a lot of successful men, they would date down if, and that's not all now, a lot of them would, if they want to have a family, If they want to they want to come home every day and have their partner there with them and be able to spend time with them. And if they want somebody to help raise the kids, they will typically date somebody who's not as driven or as ambitious as they are, because that person will always be available. Imagine if you're a successful person, man or woman, and or let's look at it from a man's point of view for right now. You're a successful man and you date a woman who's just as successful or ambitious as you are, right? And you want to have a family, and every day you come home, you want to come home and you want to have dinner with that person, spend time with that person. If that person is working a job as aggressively as you are in trying to build up their career, they're probably on business trips, they're probably working late hours, they're probably at business meetings. So you're going to come home and you're not going to have that person there. So sometimes it's not about a successful man being intimidated by a successful woman. It's about a successful man saying, hey, the right choice right now, if based off what I want, would be to date somebody who's not as ambitious as I am. An example of that from a woman's point of view, I think a great example of that is Oprah Winfrey and Stedman, right? Oprah Winfrey, she may have one, I'm not sure, but let's say she wanted to have somebody who's constantly there with her, somebody who, when she comes home, that person is there. Somebody, when she travels, they can travel with her. So she went and got herself a Stedman. She could have gotten another guy who was extremely successful, driven, and motivated as her. But if her goal was to have a partner there to support her emotionally and be there with her at all times, imagine if she got somebody who was a movie star or an athlete or a very, very successful business person. That person would not have time to spend with her. So therefore, she would come home to an empty home. And when she traveled, that person will not be there and they'll constantly be missing each other. All right. So this is why I believe you see a lot of successful women um, having issues finding partners, because they're looking at it from the point of view of, I'm a successful person, I'm a successful woman, and I want a guy just as successful as I am. But that successful guy who lives in reality and understand what he's getting himself into, because he's thinking more logically, may sit there and say, well, you're a great person, you're wonderful, but you're not what I'm looking for, because you're not going to be able to be there for me emotionally. I need an emotional partner, or I need somebody at home, if that's what that person is looking for, right? So it all comes down to two people who are looking for the same thing meeting each other. And typically two ambitious or very ambitious people together, it looks good on paper, but it just doesn't look good emotionally or family wise. All right. Now let's look at career wise. Why is it that a man let's say a man and a woman go to school to become a lawyer, and they become lawyers, and they both are trying to become partners. Why is it that the man is more likely to succeed than the woman in becoming a partner? One, like I said before earlier, if the woman decided that she wanted to become partner and she wanted to focus on her career, she has to pick the right partner. If she picks the right partner, right, she can take the time off and have the child. She can take the time off and recover after having the child. But if she picks the right partner, the guy who's going to stay at home or not be as driven as she is, and take the time off and stay at home and raise the kid, take the kid to school, come home, take care of the kid, and be there for the child, and give up and maybe not even give up his career, but just not as ambitious as she is, and just works a regular 9 to 5, she can recover from having a child, being married and having a child, and still succeed in becoming a partner at her law firm. But if she doesn't pick the right partner and she picks a guy who's just as driven, as ambitious as she is, and she decides that she wants to have a kid, or if the husband decides he wants to have a kid and she agrees to have the kid with him, but nobody's willing to give up their career, okay? At the end of the day, because the mother is more of the person who's nurturing and caring, she will end up typically walking away from her career, or her having the child will typically affect her career more, where she cannot work the long hours, take those extra trips, business trips, take the cases that are going to keep her in the office late at night. And so therefore she will not be able to really progress within her career. That's why it's extremely, extremely important that whether or not you're a man or a woman, you pick the right partner. Otherwise, it can affect everything around you. All right. Now, I can keep going on and on this, but I think that's the most simplest way to put it. Um, if you really are looking to, if you're really, and I'm not saying like, okay, and let me rephrase this. I know we started off with the pay gap disparity, and I'm not saying that's the end all be all, but I'm just saying to you that is one of the key examples of why I believe that there's a pay disparity when it comes down to management, supervisor, board of directors, CEO levels, because either a woman has to decide that she's not going to have a family at all, or she's going to have to pick the right partner to be there with her, and that's typically not the person who's going to be just as driven as she is if she wants to succeed on that level. All right. It may not be right, it may not be fair, but that's just the way it is. That's just the way it is, and that's just the way most people think who are trying to grow at that level. That's why I said a lot of times, and this is why I think most of you guys will see a lot of times successful men, they will typically date down because that person kind of helps balance them off if they want to have the family and the whole 9 yards as well. Um, Now there's other situations that I can talk about in regards to um, pay disparities and everything else like that. But these are some of the basic things that I think a lot of people don't look at, and especially when you hear a lot of like active feminist groups going out there and they're talking to women, they're telling women a lot of things, and they're saying a lot of things, and people are just like regurgitating and spitting out what these other people are saying without necessarily thinking about it. If this conversation I just had doesn't make sense to you, then it's just because you don't want to open up your mind and you don't want to think about it. You don't want to accept reality for what it is. Um, I try not to make my podcasts too long, and we're going well into the 15-minute mark. So I'm going to cut it short here. And, hopefully with future podcasts, we can have people call in, give their feedback. But if you're listening to this on Spotify, iTunes, or even on YouTube, or anywhere else, go ahead and leave a comment. I'll be able to read it, and I'll probably do a follow up on this one because this is a topic that you cannot cover within one day or within a 15-minute mark. You guys have a good one, but I just feel like this just had to be said, and that's it.